Buenas and half a day. This virtual meeting of the Senior Citizens Housing Task Force is hereby called to order. For the record, today is Thursday, November 18th, 2021, and the time now is 10:02 a.m. In accordance with open government law, notices for this meeting were sent on November 10th, 2021, and again on November 16th, 2021. In addition, this hearing was noticed in the Guam Daily Post and on the Guam Legislature's website. Before we proceed with the discussion of virtual items on this meeting agenda, I would like to first provide some general rules of conduct for all those in attendance. The conduct of this meeting should be as follows. Please ensure that you are in adequate lighting and that your face is visible. And while you are on, please remain muted until you are called to speak. When called, please ensure that you are unmuted and you are speaking into your microphone. You can also indicate that you'd like to speak by raising your hand or typing into the in-chat feature. And during a vote on a motion, members of the committee shall show a raise of hand to confirm their vote. In the event of an objection to a motion, committee members, task force members shall voice their objection to the chair, and then we will take roll call. Discussion shall be confined to the substance and nature of this agenda, and we thank you all for your cooperation. So half a day and welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of the Senior Citizens Housing Task Force. For those here and for those watching at home, Public Law 35-140 established the Senior Citizens Housing Task Force with the purpose of assessing senior housing availability and needs. This task force, composed of government officials, community stakeholders, and housing experts, will be responsible for developing long-term solutions for Guam's aging population. I'm encouraged by the productive inaugural meeting we had last month, and there's so much work to do. In recent years, we have seen the cost of living rise and wait lists grow longer for affordable housing. And according to GORA, there are 408 seniors on their wait list. This task force is discussing the present issues, sharing ideas and long-term solutions. We heard some great good ideas at our first meeting, like exploring the feasibility of renovating existing homes, evaluating existing government properties, and building new homes suitable for independent and assisted living, and the need to offer them at affordable rates. Additionally, we are looking at developing our caregiver workforce so that our Manamco can peacefully age with the assistance they need. We are looking ahead by planning for the future of our aging population, and we are planning for the future of all. Our island culture prides itself in honoring and caring for our Manamco, so we are going to put in the work to support our elders and support our families because that's who we are. Let's assure our Manamco that they can age with dignity and grace. And I'm looking forward to our discussions here today and the work we will embark on in the coming months for the future of our Manamco. So I'll ask our staff here on the line to take roll of the task force at this time.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Amanda L. Shelton, Chair, Committee on Advancement of Senior Citizens.
Half a day present.
Ms. Charlene St. Nicholas, Acting Administrator, Division of Senior Citizens, Department of Public Health and Social Services.
Present.
Ms. Edith C. Pangolinan, President, Guam Housing Corporation.
Present.
Mr. Ray Topaznia, Executive Director, Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority.
Present.
Mrs. Diana Calvo, General Public Member, Executive Director, Catholic Social Services.
Present.
There we go. Thank you. Mrs. Lourdes B. Mendiola, Representative, Developmental Disabilities Council. Ms. Melanie Mendiola.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Melanie Mendiola, CEO, Administrator, Guam Economic Development Authority, represented by Antoinette Leon Guerrero, Public Finance Assistant Manager.
Present.
Ms. Phyllis Leon Guerrero, Director, Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities, represented by Michelle Perez, Deputy Director,
Morning, present.
and Dr. Margaret Hattori Uchima, Dean, University of Guam School of Health.
Present.
Madam Chair, Senator Shelton, there is a quorum.
Assiduous Masi, Mr. Valencia, I'd like to state for the record that we are still waiting for the following appointments to serve on the task force, and that is a representative from the Guam Association of Realtors to be appointed by Governor Leon Guerrero, and a representative from the Guam Council on Senior Citizens, which will be impaneled. Do we hear a motion to ratify our virtual meeting minutes from October 21st, 2021? That document can be found on the Google Drive in the chat.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tapasnia.
Madam Chair, this is Lourdes Bascon Mendiola.
Yes.
If I may, before the minutes are moved to approve, can I just double check my title under the Guam Development Disabilities Council, because I heard president, and I just want to make a correction that I am not the president of the GDDC.
Okay, in the minutes, you are the Guam Developmental Disabilities Council representative. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you.
We'll make sure it is
Yes,
stated.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much. So is there a second to the motion to approve the minutes?
I second.
Thank you. So moved by Mr. Tapasnia, seconded by Dr. Uchima. Are there any objections? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We will now proceed with the next item on the agenda, and that is old business. This is an item that we tabled from our last meeting to provide all members some time to consider candidates for these positions. So at this time, we would like to open the floor for nominations for the task force co-chairs, a chairperson and a co-chairperson. Do we hear any nominations? Okay, I'd like to open the floor for discussion then, if anyone is interested in the position. I know that we only had one meeting so far, but if anyone would like to discuss.
If I may, Senator, can I go ahead and nominate yourself, Senator Shelton, to serve as our chairperson for this task force?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nicholas. And is there a second to the nomination?
I second it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Perez. Are there any objections?
None.
Okay, so moved then. Thank you very much. I accept the nomination to chair this task force and to continue doing this. We're very happy to see this through. And we'll take nominations for a co-chair at this time.
I'd like to nominate Michelle Perez from DISIT to be the co-chair.
Okay. Is there a second to that nomination?
We second that nomination to this
Okay,
task force.
thank you, Mr. Tapasnia. Thank you, Mr. Nicholas. Are there any objections? No objections. So moved. Ms. Perez, do you accept?
Thanks, Ray. You know, Senator, I would really like to accept. Unfortunately, I am actually a one-man band right now here at DISID. And with the new programs that we have and some other things, new projects coming abroad, I don't want to not be able to put all my time and effort into being a co-chair. So I humbly decline the nomination.
Okay, thank you. So the floor is still open for nominations.
I nominate Ray Tapasnia from Gora as the co-chair.
Okay, is there a second to the
I'll
nomination?
second that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hattori Chima. Okay, there has been a nomination. It's been seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, so moved. Mr.
Yes.
Tapasnia, you accept? Thank you very much. And so I will serve as chair of the task force, and Mr. Ray Tapasnia from Goro will serve as our co-chair. Siduos Masi, everyone, for your vote of confidence and your support. I know we have a lot of work to do, so we're eager to get to it. All right. We will now proceed with new business on the agenda. So at our last meeting, I brought to your attention the need to develop goals for the work we will do for a master plan we will submit at the end of this task force. And I did want to recommend that we look into these goals I stated at the last meeting, which are number one, providing housing for our Manamku within stable and attractive communities through the maintenance, renovation, and modification of existing homes. Two, producing new housing that meets the needs of our Manamku while not detracting from existing neighborhoods. And three, providing affordable and diverse housing to meet the needs of low and moderate income senior citizens. These goals center around the ideas of existing housing, new housing, and affordability. I'd like for us to discuss some of these goals and maybe add additional goals for us to adopt as our official working goals together here. So if there's anyone who'd like to discuss these three that I've brought up or add anything to this today, the floor is open. Okay, I was thinking maybe from the healthcare perspective, Dr. Hattori Ichima, if you could help us to develop a more specific goal to incorporate the caregiving and the workforce needs for us here today.
Okay, definitely. And you're right with the healthcare. I think it's two things. It might be two separate goals. One would be ensuring that the housing options are, take into account the, gosh, I don't know the best way to put it, but you want to look at the spectrum, right? People that are disabled as well as healthy, as well as elders that are ambulatory. I don't know a good way to word that. Diana's better with words, but to take into account the health and God, I don't know if you want to call it physical or the mobility needs, so that we ensure that that includes the disabled as well.
Okay.
And then the other goal related to the staffing, right, is the workforce development,
Okay.
ensuring that there's appropriate workforce development. And I think it would not just be health workforce, but we want to make sure, I mean, maybe we should call it health and social services workforce, trained to gosh, because you want them to address healthy aging and aging and quality aging, right? So that would even include people in nutrition, in rehab, customer service, safety, all of that. Does that make sense? But I'm so sorry, I'm not wording it well.
Yes, okay. I think we can work on the wording on our end and officially adopt that in the next meeting, but we'll keep taking the ideas. Yes, Ms. Calvo. Please unmute.
So I'm reviewing the 10 GCA on Article 13, and identifies in section 21307 what are some of the responsibilities, of which includes some kind of data gathering in order to determine what are the needs and how would we best address those needs. And although we're looking at the full service array for healthy aging till natural death and providing supports as we transition to the various stages of life, you know, I have one picture of the elderly, for example, and those would be the clients that we have at our emergency receiving home and some of the individuals that we serve who are victims of domestic violence, as well as those that are in shelter. And I think that it would be prudent for us to identify, as what we have here, what is the profile of our senior citizens population, and what is it that we can contribute to building on what resources we already have, and then how can we identify, and then identifying what are some of the gaps. Because even in some of our in-home services, what we're finding is the Manamkus own the home. Most of it is already paid for, but they are supporting adult children and their families. But sometimes the care is also not reciprocal in that, you know, Nana and Tata are the one kind of working out to provide the supports, because there are a lot of other issues associated with their adult children, you know, unemployment, that kind of stuff. And even though we may look at on the housing side, you know, there's affordability and availability of housing units, but what would that number be? And I know that in what was also provided as an attachment were the number of units available for, specifically for elderly, and then the number of AMP units and how many that are 55 and older are occupying those units within the various AMPs. I think, yes, housing and rehab of existing homes in order to support those transitions, you know, from mobility to walker to wheelchair to bedbound. Those would be kind of the considerations for construction of new housing, but then there's rehab. And it's really looking at the picture, because I don't know how many, and even when we had case management, our number, our population when we were servicing was around 2,000, but not all 2,000, you know, needed some kind of housing assistance. And Charlene, you can add on updates to those numbers. And if we look at how many are homebound and how many are receiving homebound services, that could also be part of a target population to look at, because they would be the ones that are already at a transition phase of probably needing caregivers because they need supervision. So I would at least consider, you know, what is outlined in section 21307. And then for me, it would be kind of logical to go from there, because then we have information. And I think we brought that up from the last meeting, is really getting information. And we even referenced whether there was preliminary information from our most recent census on, you know, what the age groups are. So there's 55 to, because Guam's law recognizes those age 55 as elderly, but a lot of the Title III programs begin at age 60, and then for like Medicaid, Medicare purposes and retirement from Social Security Administration, the starting age is 65, 66, with early retirement at 62.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mrs. Calvo. So we will add an additional point in our goals for data gathering, specific data gathering to help us build the profile of the senior citizens population, to help identify the gaps and determine the needs of what kind of housing is required, and then to tie that all into the assisted living needs as well. And I think that's another point in the new business on our agenda as we get further down today. But I think that those really do go hand in hand. So an additional point from Dr. Hattori Uchima for us to address the healthcare and social services needs. And then the second point for staffing and workforce development to ensure healthy and quality aging, and that we're incorporating all of the different healthcare providers who will be instrumental in this part of our endeavor. And then number three, the data gathering from Mrs. Calvo. Is there anyone else who'd like to discuss another point for our goals?
Yeah, so we can just also incorporate for the task force, so individuals with disabilities. I know that was something that was brought up, and which is why we have DISIT also on board to also help in making sure that the assisted living also is extended and included to individuals with disabilities as well.
Yes, absolutely. We will do that. Okay, so individuals with disabilities, any other points for goals?
Yes, this is Lourdes Bastimandiola. I concur with that, especially for those individuals with disabilities transitioning into the elderly age. Just to be preparing for those individuals that are already receiving services and then transitioning into the elderly housing.
Okay.
And Senator, if we could add, just to make it explicit, and I mentioned it last meeting, but maybe it should be a goal, was to ensure that whatever the planning will incorporate the most recent health and safety requirements, for the elderly, because with the pandemic, right, the senior centers for elderly, the senior living, whether it's assisted living or long-term care, like a nursing home type facility, all of those are highest risk for COVID transmission. And so if we don't follow the latest guidance, we may be setting ourselves up for future problems. So maybe health and safety and disaster preparedness.
Okay, and disaster.
Thanks.
That's a great point. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, if I may, Senator. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm just looking at it from the point we put forth our recommendations in 18 months or so. I'm part of the hospital task force, and also a number of different task forces that are pushing forward some of the administration's priorities. And my concern is, we come up with a plan, but the construction side is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge even if the funding is identified. It's going to be a challenge because we're going to be competing with the military buildup. We're going to be competing with possibly a new medical center to include public health, behavioral health, and the new GMH. So given the limited building materials and as well skilled labor. We don't want to get to the point where we put forth a recommendation, but we're not able to build anything. So my recommendation at this point is maybe we should have or do assess what structures can potentially be used for assisted living, as opposed to new construction. And if we did that, then that could be part of our planning efforts moving forward. But that's just a suggestion. I just don't want to get caught where we put all our eggs in one basket to build. We have the money to build, but we're competing with massive construction projects, so we're not able to build in expeditious manner. So those are just my thoughts. Maybe some kind of assessment of GovGuam land that's available or structures. You know, I know the church had a lot of assets that they were trying to liquidate. Maybe we could look at those. So those are just my thoughts.
Okay, sure. So another goal for us to assess existing structures of to include GovGuam property inventory and other possible things for places for sale on island that already exist. I think that's a good point for us. Okay. Anyone else?
Senator, I know that part of this planning task force is to do the assessment. So in doing that and also looking at our potential constituents, which are the elderly and the aged, will we be also maybe in part of that assessment conducting any type of stakeholder meeting engagement to get the stakeholder feedback? I recognize that we are still in COVID, but would that be something we would be proposing as part of this task force?
Oh, I'm
so that as we look at what Mr. Tapachna has brought up in terms of the limited skill labor force and potential competing construction workers and projects, as we also look at having milestones, I know that we will develop as part of this task force. So just bringing that up so that, you know, unless we're going to develop this as a group and then present it out. So that I'm only just providing this comment.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I do appreciate that and wish to bring our constituents along with us for any planning that we're doing. I'm certainly open to having stakeholder input. I mean, beyond just what we're discussing here in the task force, to get feedback before there's anything officially presented as our report at the end of the task force. I don't see that being a problem, but if anyone wants to discuss that, that's probably something that can come at a later time when we have something a little more firm to discuss with our stakeholders. Yes, Mrs. Calvo.
I don't mean to be a technical nerd, but the 3 items under new business are actually itemized under section 21307 of the law. And it actually does kind of spell out, you know, identifying current and future needs for housing and assisted living, what federal resources are available, establishing public policy goals, and then developing strategic plans on how to with regards to senior citizens housing and assisted living facilities. And it could be, I mean, it could be construed that maybe one of the intent is to build additional units, but I also think that sometimes we're building too many and we're with the thought that people will be needing it, but I think we would need to approach it conservatively, you know, and I'm considering what Mr. Tapachna is also referencing, that if there is major construction on, and these are large projects, and if we're going to be planning for other construction of senior housing and assisted living facilities, that's a lot of activity, and there's really going to be competition for whatever resources are on Guam and could be brought to Guam. And that certainly would have an impact on the project timelines. I think tying it in also with Charlene is that we don't know really what the housing looks like in our island in terms of where the Manamco live, ownership, that kind of stuff. And then if we're factoring in individuals who are on Chamorro Land Trust properties who have legitimate leases, and even some that are waiting for leases, will it extend to that private individual as opposed to building a compound or a complex? From the last meeting in Japan, there are senior housing units that is available for individuals to still remain in the unit throughout the transition until natural death. So it's an apartment complex where you can come and go as a regular tenant.
Mhm.
But if you start to need certain services, you can receive those services in-house because those in-home services are available as part of that community services. And then in some complexes, they actually have like a clinic with hospital beds and an attending physician, so that if there is a need to be in the hospital, but you really don't need to be in the hospital, it's all within that one complex. And it's affordable in the sense that in Japan, there is a requirement that everyone contributes to a long-term care insurance plan. And when people are retired, and if they're not able to afford it, then that's when the insurance kicks in to provide the payments for those kinds of services. And so that's kind of like, one design. And then there's other designs, and we've had these discussions actually within the Homeless Coalition, just because some of us are experiencing that the seniors are leaving their own home and would rather rent so they can get away from the drama of their children, and they are able to afford rent. But if we're able to also come up with a plan for affordable rental, because people are living on fixed incomes, then that would just make it that much more solid and stable for that individual to be in a housing structure. And I think that the responsibilities that have been itemized in the law in section 21307, and even in 21308, which actually identifies what would be the recommendation that the task force offers, ties in also to what would be some of those goals. And
Yes.
building, several years ago, there was a number, that by certain, and there was projections by 20 something, there was an assessment of 3,000 or 3,500 housing units that would be needed. But I think we never, at least I wasn't involved in any discussion that looked at whether those would be single dwellings or multiple unit complexes or larger complexes that would also accommodate service offices. Almost like what's happening over at LADA. They have an apartment complex there that has a hall and whatever. So it's kind of something like that. And there is, and safety is one of the biggest concerns of the Manamku. And so if they're in kind of like a gated community, or if they know that within their neighborhood block, it's pretty safe because they know everybody, then there is a high level of comfort and relief on the elderly, which then would allow them to still want to stay in their own home.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In addition to the health and safety that we were discussing with COVID protocols, that the physical safety of our seniors is really of great concern, because we know that they are a vulnerable population that is unfortunately preyed on, and so we will include that in our points. And you're right, the law that set up this task force delineated points of what we are to address. And I think that right now we're trying to also build goals to supplement what is stated in the law and help really guide our discussion. And I think these goals can help us to break off into subcommittees, obviously based on our expertise here in the task force, to gather the data to make the recommendations among ourselves. So with these additional points for goals, we will draft them up and send them to everyone in the task force before the next meeting so that we can review them, add on or edit before approval within the task force. If that's okay with everybody. Does anyone else want to include any other points before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. Another point on our agenda for today, the next item is federal infrastructure of investments in senior housing. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion on any current federal infrastructure investments being discussed nationally. We know that Guam stands to receive significant funding from the recently passed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I wanted to ask our housing agencies present today if they can provide any information to us on whether this anticipated funding can help us with our mission here with senior housing, what we're doing with this task force. I know our congressman gave out some information that should the Build Back Better Act pass, that is currently being deliberated in the House, that there would be significant benefits to us, to the entire country, and to include Guam. And so those are some things that we're also looking at. But if there's any information that our housing agencies here today can provide regarding the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was recently passed, I'd like to open the floor.
Thank you, Senator. Maybe I can start. I can only go with the press release that was issued by the congressman, where he actually indicated that GURA may be receiving as much as $86.9 million through 4 separate programs. We've reached out to our federal partners, and they haven't heard anything. So there's it's a little bit premature for me to announce anything at this point. I'm hoping we'll hear something shortly, but you know, based on what the congressman had indicated, there's a substantial amount of money that should be coming our way, and some of it will, or I believe most of it will be routed through HUD and then ultimately to GURA in terms of anything that's housing related. But at this point, nothing is set in concrete.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Anyone else? Yes, Mrs. Pangilinan.
Okay, if I may, Senator, also and staff, we have not had any information other than waiting on the BBD, which is still pending. Again, it's all federal money. We, as you know, we are a local agency, and we rely heavily on what we can bring in as revenues. But we welcome any federal funding that we may be able to avail. So currently, the one that was just signed, where the governor had the honor of being present, we don't have any yet to get from that. So we're really more waiting on the BBB that's spending. So hopefully we can get some money so we can assist again in this effort. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, we will wait patiently for any information that comes our way if you have it in the next meeting, hopefully.
Mhm.
Is there anyone else who'd like to contribute to this part of the discussion about federal resources available? All right. Okay, we'll move on to the next item on
I'm
our
sorry,
agenda. Oh,
if I
yes.
may.
Yeah.
I apologize. I just emailed to the email that was sent for this meeting on the job stacks that will deliver for Guam, that maybe they can share the group if they don't already have it, but it lists down what is Guam expecting from that recent passed bill. So I just emailed it to the same email that said this.
Okay, thank you. We will include that in our minutes for the next meeting, definitely. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Leon Guerrero.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on now to C, assisted living options, the next item on our agenda. And I know that there are a lot of different assisted living options that are available in the United States. And Mrs. Calvo, and I think Dr. Torio Chima, you discussed different options that you both saw when you visited Japan that we can discuss here today. We might be getting ahead of ourselves talking about these assisted living options when we're still trying to collect the data and see the real need of what we're missing here and what our people will be needing shortly. But I think we can just lay some of the options on the table and start the discussion to help us frame the picture for the next time. And so some that we've come across in our own research here in the Committee of the Advancement of Senior Citizens is independent living, which is an option for older adults who are ready to transition to senior living, but are still active and do not yet need daily assistance. These are seniors who choose independent living and can look forward to maintenance-free living with convenience of on-site amenities and social opportunities. Then there's assisted living, which is a type of residential senior care well suited for seniors who need some assistance with their activities of daily living, but do not need any regular medical care. Residents have access to staff around the clock for emergency assistance and receive assistance with their daily tasks, including eating, dressing, and bathing. Then there's memory care, which is specialized for seniors living specifically with advanced memory impairment, seniors living with Alzheimer's and dementia, who oftentimes need they have different needs, both physical and emotional needs, than any adults in the previously mentioned facilities. Then there's a respite care, a form of short-term care that provides temporary relief for primary caregivers, giving caregivers the freedom to travel, to work outside the home, to visit friends, or to take a break from their caregiving responsibilities. This type of care is very flexible, and they can take place within a senior's existing home or in a residential care facility or in adult daycare centers. And then we have adult daycare centers, which are short-term daytime respite for caregivers of seniors. And unlike respite care, overnight care is not an option with adult daycare. This is something that we know on Guam. Adult daycare centers are typically open during normal business hours, making this an appealing option for family caregivers who have daytime jobs in addition to their caregiving. And then there are continuing care retirement communities. This is from independent living to skilled nursing and memory care. This enables seniors to remain in the same community as they age and their needs progress. They are typically, they have several different buildings or areas that make up a community, and with different care levels separated into these different areas. I think this may be something similar to what you were discussing, Mrs. Calvo, that you've seen in Japan. And then skilled nursing facilities or nursing homes, which is the highest level of care in the spectrum of senior care. And these communities provide around-the-clock skilled care from trained medical professionals, as well as a short-term rehabilitation services like physical and occupational therapy. So if anyone would like to add anything here that we're missing to this list for us to be considering, or discuss any of these points, please, the floor is open.
Senator, if I may, if we could add a hospice type of care facility. So even a while back, myself and my former administrator, Mr. San Augustine, we did also look at areas of assisted living. This was a couple of years ago. So the areas that you mentioned with the memory care, the independent living, we actually went to Hawaii and looked at the various types of assisted living. So they do have those. And I know we brought up that the costs vary. It's you know, how much are you able to provide? And in that case, a lot of them had long-term care insurance. So I think part of our group, maybe one of our group activities is to look at long-term care insurance to see if that's even viable on Guam, and provide that as an option, as we also look at those who are getting into the age of not just being a senior, but, you know, an individual with disability. So they did also have a hospice care. It's an area that was more home-like based, and for individuals that, you know, knowing that their end of life is coming, we're able to be cared for. So I think that's something to look at as one area. So, and then another area is maybe we may want to look at group style assisted living, where an individual, you know, may, similar to wanting to be like a foster parent, we can look at a grandparent type of housing. So just bringing that up as we look at our inventory of what our activities as a task force is to be. So those are just 2 points. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for that contribution. Anyone else?
Yes, if I may, Senator, my apologies. Edith and I may have to exit prematurely because we're also part of the Interagency Council for Homelessness, and that starts at 11, chaired by the Lieutenant Governor. But if I may, there's maybe the committee should also consider the fact that there have been plans or discussions that have been talked about, not by Guam, but in the private sector, in terms of building a assisted living facility. So, you know, we don't want to be planning something and somebody else has a similar plan. Maybe the committee can start dialogue with, I believe it was Dr. Akimoto that had spoke previously about his plans to build an assisted living facility. So maybe it'll be in our best interest to also engage some discussion with them.
Sure, okay. Thank you.
And Senator, I just wanted to add that another option, and thank you, because Public Health brought that up. And I'm sure when you went to Hawaii, you noticed the board and care homes. So instead of the government, or, you know, in tandem, the government can, you know, work on government funded housing. But in Hawaii and California, when I worked there, they have really a nice economic base of board and care homes where individuals open they build their house separate. I mean, you know, especially for these groups, some will have 3 bedrooms, some might have 4. Diana, it kind of reminds me of your group homes already. So it's a house that's been remodeled, but these are, most of them, some states only allow ambulatory clients, some allow ambulatory plus wheelchair or walker, but not 100% bedridden unless you have a home care agency or a hospice. But that might be a good way for the private sector or, private individuals to also assist in the need, because no matter what the government does, you're not going to meet the huge need, especially after hearing some of Diana's numbers. But in many states, that's regulated by the Department of Public Health. So, that you have to take that into consideration as well. But that's an option. And then I totally agree with you on adding hospice. And then just the other consideration would be, and I don't know if I said this already, but GMH, GRMC have clients that have no housing options. Dan is very familiar with that. And both social work departments at those hospitals have data on the numbers of the dollars amount that they've spent, the government has lost on housing them in the hospitals. So I think we'll have to, there's just so much going on that needs to be looked at, but I think prioritizing what the government's, what the needs are of the community, I think will be a big step in determining some of the recommendations, because it's such a huge, gamut of needs.
Sure. So we will definitely reach out to Dr. Akamoto. Mr. Chapasna, thank you for that recommendation. And look at this example of board and care homes, which I think are, a good way for us to tap into the public-private partnership aspect of this. When government can't provide all of the services, there are different options for us to look at. So I appreciate that very much. So we will add these onto the list and provide them to all of the task force members in our minutes. Is there anything else for discussions or any announcements or points that anyone wants to bring up before we adjourn today? All right, no, at this time, we don't have a date set yet, but we will send out a notice to all of the task force members as soon as we get a date available, and we will send it out through public notice and publish it in the paper as well as on the website. I'd like to thank all of the task force members for being here today, for your contributions to this meeting. And I'd like to thank the public for viewing at home on our YouTube channel and on our television channels, Seduas Masi. This Senior Citizens Housing Task Force is hereby concluded, this virtual meeting. The time now is 10:55 a.m. and we will let you know of the next meeting as soon as possible. Seduas Masi, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much.
Thank you.